So, yeah, I think let's just begin. And again, so firstly, as I always say, as a three principles practitioner, we know that I'm not diagnosing or labeling anybody. This is just, I use the word, well, there's two reasons why I use the words codependency and narcissistic abuse and love addiction. And that is, because it just basically points to a set of behaviors and thinking that somebody can have, not necessarily that we're diagnosing the person. We know underneath all of that, everybody is whole, complete, not damaged, broken, or anything like that. But the other reason I use the words too, because sometimes in the three principles community, people will say to me, well, why are you even using the words? I want, it was coming across the principles that absolutely helped me in this area in particular. And I really want to reach as many people as possible. And I know that there are hundreds and thousands of people out in the world suffering from what we describe as codependency, love addiction, narcissistic abuse. And I want to be able to help them. So that's also why I use this terminology. So I wanted, kind of, my mouth is dry this morning. I'm not nervous. I love doing these things, but anyway, so I want to make a distinction between codependency and love addiction, or we'll call it a love addict. Now, people think that they're the same thing. They're not. Most people who suffer from love addiction suffer from codependency, but not every codependent suffers from love addiction. So I thought I would just go over a few of the traits, the more sort of, classic traits of what it is to be codependent. And then I'll add on, because as I said, it's sort of, most love addicts are codependent. Codependents are not necessarily love addicts. So I will give the traits of the codependency, which is we suffer from low self-esteem. We tend to look for outside validation from others. We have this sort of emptiness, this hole, just this pit that needs to be filled up. So we look for others to fill it up. We tend to, feel dependent on other people for our happiness and our security. We've spent most of our lives being people pleasers. We negate our own needs and wants and put others' needs and wants ahead of our own. We settle for crumbs in all areas of our life, not just in our relationships, but how we show up in our careers, how we show up within our families, maybe with our parents or with our children. We, put them first and negate our own needs. The other thing is, again, this is all due to childhood trauma. We often want to appear to be needless and wantless. We don't want to drive people away, so we act like that we're self-sufficient, we're needless and wantless, which is not true. We tend to take things very personally. We're very sensitive, hypersensitive to criticism, again, due to often our childhood environment we grew up in. We tend to feel responsible for other people's feelings. We're always, we're rescuers, very sensitive, very loving people. It's not all bad by any means, but sometimes we feel over responsible. That's a massive part of being codependent. We also have weak boundaries. We tend to, we have movable boundaries, I'll say. If we sense that we might be, we have a fear of abandonment. We have a fear of being left. So if it looks like we hold a boundary and somebody's not happy, we move that boundary because we're trying to keep the other person happy so they stay with us. So to add on top of that, the love addiction traits, and one of the main things is we are actually addicted to the feeling of being in love. We get a high from that, and I'll go a little bit further into that a little bit later. We tend to have a really sort of unhealthy, obsessive nature when it comes to our romantic relationships. We can be overly dependent on our partner. And we spend a lot of time up in our heads thinking about the relationship. We fear being alone, or being left. This is a leftover of abandonment issues from childhood. We actually unconsciously carry a fear of intimacy. We might not think it because we're always sort of looking for a relationship, but we often didn't have a healthy role model, a healthy relationship role model growing up. So there's this unconscious fear of what a healthy relationship looks like. So because of that, we're often find ourselves attracted to unavailable people. Now that unavailability might come in all different forms. It can come in the form of, a married man. It can come in the form of a narcissistic man or woman, depending on obviously what your preferences and partners. It also can take the form of somebody that's in an active addiction. It can, or just be somebody that has, due to their own childhood, some real fear of intimacy. On the flip side of love addiction is love avoidant. So we tend to sort of be attracted to those types. And there's a couple of reasons for that too, which one of them being is that we, there's, I'll talk about it later. It's a thing called limerence, where we're constantly in that sort of like yearning. And due to that, we have this sort of chemical reaction in our brain, which we get addicted to. So we tend to, as love addicts, we tend to stay in unhealthy relationships where we feel abused and unloved and disrespected. Then we have a lot of shame around that, and we judge ourselves for that. And then we feel depressed and helpless and resigned to suffer in these situations. We are also very attracted to people that we feel that we want to fix. Again, there's a sort of an unconscious motivation of that in there is like, if I'm needed, I won't be left. It's like, it's not just about being loved. It's about when you become sort of essential to another person, they're less likely to leave you. So I also want to say that love addiction is no different than any other addiction. The only difference is, the behavior behind all addiction is to get away from feeling uncomfortable. And the difference in love addiction is that we don't need to go and get alcohol or drugs to change how we feel. Neither do we have to engage in activities like, excessive gambling or shopping or sex or those sort of activities. We actually can escape or numb ourselves out simply by going into fantasy, into romantic fantasy. We can, and this again, as I said, it started in childhood. I mean, clearly as a young child, you couldn't go to a bar or get alcohol or drugs or those activities. So that's why it's actually one of the, it's one of those addictions that's the hardest, because it really is not dependent on anything outside in. It is created within yourself via your thinking. So before I go into the principles and how it helped me break those years and years of habitual behaviors and thinking that kept me, stuck in that type of behavior, I just want to say that, as I said, it's often a result of childhood trauma. Now that trauma can look very different, and it's on a continuum. Some of it is very overt trauma and some is very subtle, and neither one is worse than the other. I sometimes find that when you have really overt trauma, it's like easy to go, oh my God, yeah, I understand this. And when it's more subtle, it's harder to pinpoint it. So there is no one is worse than another by any means. If anything, as I say, the more subtle sometimes is harder for somebody to really grasp. But some of the types of neglect abuse we could have experienced, or trauma as a child, is neglect, abuse. It could either be emotional, physical, or sexual, abandonment, inconsistent parenting, smothering parenting, and any other, type of trauma you can think of. But, I often think back to, when you think about how our parents, or some of our parents, I think a vast majority, certainly I'm 62 now, so back in the sort of 50s and 60s, a lot of our parents used to have to, in trying to create happy, healthy children that were growing up into responsible adults, they used withdrawal of affection and approval to control our behavior. Now, as a young child, that feels like abandonment. You get hyper vigilant, like, is my mum going to love me anymore? Is my dad going to love me anymore? So you have this real sort of fear of abandonment, just by simply a very common classic way of parenting that our parents parented from. So, God, I don't know what's wrong with me. Oh, I know I ate something salty for breakfast. Now, so as I said before, the if you grew up in any of those environments, it was very easy for a young child, when they felt in pain or suffering, to sort of escape into what we call the rescue fantasy. And our culture supports this. I mean, my God, when you think about it, the fairy tales we grew up with or were, read, it was always about knights in shining armor or princes coming to save us. So, if you're suffering trauma as a child, and you can, get into that state of believing that somebody was going to come and rescue and end that trauma, and you started to feel better, you carry that into your adult life. So, I know for me, I grew up in a sort of, unusual circumstances, just let's put it that way. I grew up without a father. It was chaotic. It was very painful for me. I was a very unhappy child. And I developed the rescue fantasy. For me was that, one day my father was going to come and be part of our family, and everything would be better. Well, I sort of innocently carried that fantasy into my adult life. I wanted to be rescued by a male, particularly a father figure type. So, the other thing I wanted to mention, it's not just an emotional addiction. There is a neurochemical addictive quality to it too. So they've done a lot of research on this. And as I mentioned earlier, there's this thing called limerence. And that's this neurochemical rush of well, let me tell you what they are. They're oxytocin, which is our bonding chemical. We've all heard about it when we have children, that we have this, rise in oxytocin, so we bond with our children. We also, oxytocin comes through a result of having sex with somebody. It's a bonding thing. So just even going into what we call limerence, which is the rescue fantasy, or the longing for love, will have a rise in oxytocin. So, that's one part of the cocktail. And endorphins get engaged. And then we have cortisol running through us too, and adrenaline and dopamine. And that is a really gripping neurochemical cocktail that we can produce within ourselves. You don't have to go out to a bar and say, give me a mixed drink. I mean, it's there for us anytime we need it. So it's obvious that would be a place we would go if we're suffering distress, fear, loneliness, or any of those things. So, so what I also wanted to mention is, a little bit about fear of intimacy. I mentioned it earlier, that unconscious fear of intimacy. Now, if we didn't have a positive role model growing up, a healthy, role models as in a healthy relationship, maybe we grew up with a single parent, or maybe our parents fought a lot, or whatever it was, we unconsciously carry that fear in us, which can also have us avoid healthy relationships. We'd actually rather be in our fantasy. So, in my case, my mother was a single mother. She clearly had a fear of intimacy, even though she would never admit to it. She just happened to keep falling in love with married men and having children with them. And you know, she just thought it was happening by accident. But I have a lot of love and compassion for her, because I see that, you know, she grew up in a really horrible environment. Her parents were, you know, not nice to each other at all. And I won't go into all the details. So clearly she had a fear of intimacy of that type. So she unconsciously, to her, attracted unavailable partners. But she could live in this state of limerence. She was constantly yearning for when they were going to be able to see her. So for me growing up, I witnessed that. So yes, I hadn't a clue how to be in a healthy relationship based on what I saw. I also had a fear of you know, being in a relationship, because I thought, my father cheated on his wife. And so I thought, gosh, if I get into a relationship, you know, my partner's going to cheat on me. So I'd rather not be in a relationship. So I acted out a little differently than my mother, but I definitely inherited that fear of intimacy. And I sort of would fall in love with unavailable men, in the sense that they were either narcissistic, or it may have had an active addiction or something like that. There was something that they were always just, you know, just out of reach. So I, again, was addicted to that state of limerence, just in a different way. So what I wanted to talk about was what it was that I saw once I came across the principles. Well, first of all, I roll back a bit. I spent 30 years in therapy, trying to recover from my childhood and make sense of it. I was, you know, as I said, I had a pattern of very unhealthy relationships. Not all of them. I had wonderful men in my life as well, but those were the ones I left, because again, you know, if you have this fear of intimacy, you will, you'll do anything to create separation, to pull apart from a healthy man or healthy relationship or healthy woman, depending on who you're with. But for me, so I would find myself in these wonderful relationships, but I would either always leave them or do something to wreck them. Then I'd swing over here and I would be with an unavailable man. And I felt great in that relationship for a little while, because I loved that, as I said, that, you know, neurochemical cocktail of limerence. But then it would become too painful and I'd swing back to what I thought, you know, what I needed, a healthy relationship, panic in that. So this was my swinging backwards and forwards for many years. And therapy helped me understand a lot of it, but it didn't really show me the way out. That was something I only came across when I came across the principles. So let me go into my principles part. So what I saw, I saw so much, and I can't go into all of it, and it's, you know, years of accumulated grounding in the principles. But one of the things I saw at first was that, and I'd heard this phrase because I also went to a place called the University of Santa Monica and studied for a master's in spiritual psychology. And I'd always heard the term, you know, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But that just sounded like a really cute phrase to me. I never really got it, even though I was in spiritual communities for, you know, 40 years. But what I really saw when I came across the principles was that we really, I'll use my little snow globe here. We all come from the same source. We all come from the same spiritual energy. And that, I'm told, I haven't heard it directly from Sid Banks in any of his lectures, but Dick Bettinger told me that Sid said that we are made up of 96% of us is our spiritual essence. And it's only 4% that is that little human expression of that vast, you know, majority of us. So when I saw it in that, it was like, oh my God, I am mostly spiritual with this tiny little bit of a human thing that, you know, in its innocence forgets that I'm spiritual and believes it's all up to me. But when I saw the ratio, and knowing that at our spiritual essence, we are all created equal. Nobody got a bit more of, you know, innate well-being or a bit more innate wisdom or resilience. Everybody got the same. So we basically come into this world of form with exactly the same amount. as I said, all those things, well-being, resilience, wisdom. Yeah, of course, in our little, that physical expression of our spiritual nature, we all show up differently. Some of us are taller, shorter, fatter, thinner, blonde, dark, whatever it is. We all show up slightly different, which is wonderful. And we don't want to get rid of that. That's beautiful, to, the unique way we express ourselves here in the world of form. But what I really saw was, oh my God, if 96% of me is equal to everybody else on the planet, why am I believing that I need somebody else to save me? I have everything inside me that I need to save myself. And I understand as a child, you don't have access to that. You don't know that. Of course, you're going to think somebody bigger, better, stronger is going to help rescue you and save you. But as an adult, we can see, oh, that's not true. We're not less than anybody else. We're equal to everybody else. So that was a huge thing for me. As I say, I stopped seeing myself as less than everybody. I stopped seeing other people as stronger or better or more capable than me. I stopped looking to for people to rescue me. So that was a huge component for me in getting over my love addiction. The other thing that I saw that was massive to me as well is the inside out nature of life. I think all of us prior to coming across the principles, especially in Western culture and Eastern culture, know we know that that our experience isn't directly coming from the outside in. But in Western culture, we're brought up to believe that. I mean, it starts off even as a very young child when, I remember my mum saying to me, you're driving me crazy, or you're making me angry, or you've made me happy now. And, it's like, okay, I can make people feel a certain way. I mean, that was my belief. And equally so, if I can make you feel that way, you can make me feel that way. So when I felt sad or down or depressed or angry or hurt, I would always look to the outside to fix the outside, fix the people in my life, fix my environment, fix my circumstances. And that's a lot of really busy work, running around trying to change people, trying to change everything happening on the outside. So when I saw that my experience of life was actually coming to me via my thinking about the people and about my circumstances and about the environment, I started to settle. And when I started to settle, and here again, this is, with the, with love addiction, once I started to see that it was coming to me via my thinking, I just started to calm down. And, I'll quote the Serenity Prayer here because it's so, appropriate, is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I love how that ties into the principles, because we're not saying suffer your circumstances or stay in an abusive relationship. We're not saying that. And that's where we say, recognizing what we can change, like us, sometimes our circumstances, sometimes the state of our relationship. Now, we know better than knowing we can change somebody else, because we tried that for many years and it hasn't worked. But we can make changes within ourselves. We have the right to say, this is not the right relationship for me. This is not in alignment for my highest good. I have the right to leave. And again, the principles, when we remember what I just said earlier about we all come into this world with the same amount of resilience and well-being and wisdom. Our partners, if they are actively, in addiction or anything like that, they have the same things we have in us. We are not obliged to stay and rescue anybody. So we're not expecting to be rescued, and we stop being rescuers. We have the right to say, this is not serving in service to me. We don't become cold, hard, and calculated, but we stop being self-sacrificing and feeling over responsible. Now, the other thing I saw was the thoughts in my head that had plagued me all my life, telling me things like I was worthless, ugly, stupid, fat, whatever this voice was telling me, I thought that voice was helping. I thought it was telling me who I was. I thought it was reminding me. It was like, it was like my mother's voice, don't get me too big for your boots, or who do you think you are? So this internal voice that would like keep telling me that I wasn't good enough and things like that was, when I learned that that actually was not telling me about me, that was just the nature of thought. It just flows through you. It's the creative nature. Thoughts just like that all day long. I mean, we only have to look at our crazy dreams at night to see how random our thoughts are. Well, that's happening during the daytime too. They're just random. Yeah, another crazy thought, another crazy thought. So when I realized they weren't personal to me, that was massive. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to take that so seriously, and that was a huge thing for me. And then the other thing that I saw was that that I didn't have to control that thinking. I didn't have to put a stop to it. What I saw was that if I left it alone, it would just move on. If I stopped paying attention to it, it moved on even faster. And before I knew it, these thoughts, not to say they don't still sometimes show up, but never, nowhere near like they used to. Before, they were just constant. I could hear them all day long. Occasionally now I'll get a thought of like, I'm writing a book right now. The thought sometimes comes in, yeah, great, Del, you've been writing this book for a few years, so it's not going to happen. And then I go, that's just thinking when I'm in low mood. There's no truth to that. I have everything inside me to write this book, and I am writing, but I just sometimes put myself into this fear of, is it going to be complete? I go off into, that's the other thing I learned. Oh my God. Again, staying in the present moment, not going off into the future, not letting these fearful thoughts hijack me. It was like the second we are up here in our personal minds, that's where we start feeling fear of the future, regret for the past. So when I can sort of not pay attention to that and know that if I'm feeling fear or feeling regret, I am not in the present moment for sure. Because as we say, unless, we are literally, got the saber-toothed tiger sort of breaking into our house, we really aren't in danger day to day, moment to moment. Not saying that it can't happen, it can, but in general, we are not in immediate fear unless we are in our heads in the future. So, and again, Sydney Banks' famous quote, when I first came across this, it was like, what does that mean? But it's so true. And it just, the depth of it keeps getting truer and truer for me, which is, if the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. So, when we have these fearful thoughts and things like that, of course we want to numb out from them. If we don't know that they're going to just move through us and that they're not personal to us, we are going to reach for substances or behaviors, or, as I said, that sort of rescue fantasy or that state of limerence to not feel the full impact of our feelings. But when we know it's just what humans do, we just have these crazy, I think they said 60 to 100,000 thoughts a day just flowing through us. When we know not to take them seriously, we know that we don't have to escape them. We don't have to numb ourselves out. So, and then lastly, what I saw, this is huge for me again. Again, growing up with that feeling of my father living a couple of miles down the road and never acknowledging me, and my siblings, I had this absolute ache and emptiness and wound inside me that I thought the only way it could be filled up was with somebody's love. I didn't feel loved growing up. Even with my mother, she was very loving in my later years, but when I was young, she was, in survival mode. She had 7 children to raise, and she converted our home into a home for mentally disabled people, and so she was really busy. She in essence had 57 children, not 7, and she was doing it on her own. So I felt this emptiness and this longing as a child that I believed could only be filled up with love, and love from the outside in. And when I saw that, again, what the principles points to is that we are made of love. That essence of who we are, that 96% of us is made of pure love, pure peace, pure joy. It's there all the time. But I had an image once where it was almost like I'm standing in this beautiful freshwater lake, just crystal clear lake that that I could drink from, but holding an empty cup going, I'm thirsty, fill my cup, not knowing that I was already immersed in this beautiful fresh drinking water. And it's the same with love. I had no idea that I was made of love. I was immersed in love at my spiritual essence. And so I, again, would keep going for people to fill the cup. But due to my fear of intimacy, unconscious, of course, my cup never got filled. Or if it did, oh my God, God forbid somebody fill my cup, I'd tip it out and run away because it was too scary for me. So either way, my cup was always empty. And when I really started to not pay attention to this personal thinking, to really settle into who I really was at my essence, that well of love that we come from or are made from started to sort of rise up in me just naturally. I didn't have to do anything. I just started to feel calmer, more loving, more satiated. And I stopped looking for it from the outside in. And I remember my son saying to me once, Mom, why are you so loving? And I said, I love being in love. But the thing was, it wasn't the type of in love I used to want to be in love, that limerence type of in love and longing type of in love. It was literally a bathing in the love that I know I am. And it just naturally just keeps pouring forth and pouring out of me now. So I would love to open it up for questions or share a little bit about your journey. Just everything. I'd love to go to the top of the hour, but I would love it to be more interactive and have you share if there was anything you saw new or anything you're still struggling with or anything like that. I can see there was only a few of us here, so just raise your hand like that and I can call on you. Oh, lovely. Sharon knew I was going to call on her.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I could really resonate with a lot of that, especially the love avoidance and the fear of intimacy. Mm. And I've never thought of it like that. So that's made me just, have I got a fear of intimacy? Yeah. So that's made me kind of question that, but that kind of yo-yoing, and then if something does feel nice, pushing it away. Yeah. Total answer. Yeah, total hands up to that.
Yeah, and it's unconscious, and I have one friend in particular. She was always falling in love with unavailable men, and she kept saying to me, "What is it? Why are men unavailable and women available?" And it was innocent. She just didn't see it. But when we have this unconscious fear of intimacy, and we need this sort of safe space, call it safe space, because too much closeness. Now we could have been smothered by a parent. We could have, and love felt, too much, like, like back off, because sometimes codependent parents can be smothering. They want to be enmeshed with their children, especially if they're unhappy with their partner. They can be, and a man too, you can become daddy's little princess and he can become enmeshed with you. So there's this fear that we grow up with where we want to push away intimacy. And so what happens is, say this is the sort of love addict here, and this is, say, a love avoidant. Now, immediately you can see there's going to be this distance. Now, if we start coming towards the love avoidant, they move away. And so there's always this wonderful space there, which actually underneath it, we think, in our personal thinking, we think, oh, I don't like that. I want more closeness. But deep down unconsciously, we love that setup. We love that safe distance. Now, and this can happen within a relationship too. This isn't always just, some people are not set in stone. Now, if for any reason that love addict just starts pulling away, this love avoidant has the freedom now to start coming towards you. But again, there is a distance. Now, if the love addict goes, oh, look, the love avoidant is coming towards me, and turns around and starts, the love avoidant will run away again. So you can do this. They call it the dance of intimacy. You can be stuck in a relationship thinking you're going crazy, going, oh, what happens? You know, as soon as I pull away or don't seem disinterested, they want me. And as soon as I say, okay, I'm here, they go away again. And it's a very, very crazy making, damaging dance you can do. That's one thing. So people that keep thinking they just unfortunately are finding unavailable people really need to look inside and say, where am I unavailable? What am I afraid of? And it's because, again, we can only, you know, have self-awareness and see where we might be acting out unconsciously, having some unconscious thinking that is having us behave in a certain way. So did you hear anything more in there, Sharon?
Yeah. There's things to look at. Yeah. I feel it. I feel it in my stomach as you're talking. To, you know, that bit of tightness of like, oh, that could be true of what I'm doing, and or what I've done, I should say. And yeah, so well, just again turning up. I know there's something to see, because I keep feeling like attracted. I want to hear a bit more, and I want to hear a bit more, and it's just more and more is like.
And you know the beauty of, because I'll admit I don't like too much intimacy. I know that about myself. I can tolerate a lot more than I used to be able to tolerate. You know, I've been in this lovely relationship for 11 years now, but because I am stronger in who I am and I have healthier boundaries, I set them. So I probably set my boundaries a little further out than most people, because I don't know what that's just my comfort level. I didn't grow up with sort of, you know, seeing that sort of, so we have a really, he lives with me now because his house burnt down. But for the first 9 years, we had separate houses. And I loved that. And he was fine with it too. Because that gave me that little bit of space that I knew I needed. Now, in my other relationships, I judged myself for that. I thought there was something wrong with me. There was something, I was broken. What's wrong with me that I don't want this, you know, close relationship? So, so my boundaries were weak. Now my boundaries are very clear. It's like, you know, hey, you do your thing, I do my thing. We're monogamous, we're committed, but there's freedom. You know, if I want to go and travel on my own, I just say, hey, I'm doing this. You know, I don't think it's a very healthy relationship. And I'm very, but I am aware that there is still that part of me that likes my own space, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, as long as you are honest about it, and you both share what your needs and wants are, and you're both in agreement with that, and there's no sort of shaming or blaming or anything like that, you know, whatever works for you in a relationship is entirely, you know, up to you. And a lot of people, certainly at my age, when we've been married and had children, sort of love the companionship, but might not want to actually get married again and live in the same house again. You know, so again, it's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I used to have friends saying, what's wrong with you? And I'd be like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I have the best relationship ever. I've never been so truthful about who I am and what I want in life. And it's working out beautifully for both of us. So anyway, so hopefully you will keep seeing more, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually nice to know when you say it's okay, because I like to live alone. I don't ever want to live with somebody. And people say, oh, you need to live with somebody, you need to be. And it's like, but I like my own space, and I don't want to share my living environment. I won't even let my kids come back, let alone anybody else. And I like that. So I quite like that you said kind of wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I don't mind living with my boyfriend while he rebuilds his house, because he's so easygoing and he doesn't smother me, and he's not possessive, and he's even keeled. So it's okay. But when his house is built again, we're going to do what we did before, which is, I think that it just works for us, and this works for us too. But it's yeah, you make up your own rules between you and the person you're in a relationship with. So I love that you shared that, Sharon. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share, and anything you've heard today that you want to make a comment about?
Very insightful. As you know, the reason I joined is my sister is like in the midst of time. So I really like the way you explained that. I will take that also for my own clients and the situation with my sister. And I really enjoyed that.
All right,
it's very well explained. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know your sister doesn't speak English, does she?
No.
Oh, it's such a shame, because my 6-week program be the third time I'm running it, starting on April 3rd, and I'm getting incredible feedback. People are having massive shifts and insights into what's going on, and I'll just share a little bit about it here. I don't know if anybody doesn't know, it's a 6-week program. The first week we dive into the 3 principles, a deep dive. Obviously, that's the foundation. That's what brought me the freedom that I found. And then the second week is we deep dive into codependency and love addiction. Third week is all about sort of narcissistic personality disorder / love avoidant. Not all love avoidants are narcissistic by any means, but that is covered in that. And then the fourth week, it's understanding their dynamics, because there really is, like I described, there is a dance that goes on between a codependent and a narcissist. I mean, they are the perfect match for each other. And I use what I call the teeter-totter example. So imagine, like we call it a seesaw in the UK, but there's a seesaw. So there's a sort of axis, whatever that thing is called here, and the seesaw goes that way or that way. Now, on this sort of level of healthy entitlement, narcissists have elevated levels of entitlement and selfishness, all about them. So they're not sort of on that healthy line there. They're all the way up here. Now, a codependent or a lover addict has the opposite problem. They're all the way down here. They have no sense of self, sense of entitlement. It's all about other people. So clearly there's a balance there. Okay. So what happens, if we are down here, we're always going to be attracted to people up here. They complete us. They have something we don't have. They have confidence. They have assertiveness. They have all these things. So we look to them to complete us. Now, when we understand the principles, and we see that, oh my God, we have all that in us already. We don't need to find it in a partner. Our healthy sense of entitlement starts to raise. Well, I tell you what, narcissists are not interested in that. They go down here. They're like, no, I want all my needs met, not just partially. So if we raise our healthy level of entitlement, our ideal partner is going to come in at that too. We meet somebody that is kind, reciprocal in love. They cherish us, they adore us, they don't use and abuse us. So as we do our work, we will bring in a healthy partner. So it's understanding that is really important. And then the 5th week is, should I stay or should I go? Because again, there's no judgment. You've got to check in with yourself. And not all the narcissists in our lives are our romantic partners. They can be our adults. And especially as we get older and we have to suddenly, we start taking care of our parents again as they age, that dynamic that we grew up in can happen again. So, okay, bye, Martine. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. So it's, it's learning how to stay in that relationship with as little emotional cost as possible on you. If you choose to, and you don't have to, you can leave. You can leave. You don't have to take care of your parents. You don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. But I like people to know they have options. There are no shoulds and oughts, and there's no judgment. And then the 6th week is, again, with the foundation of the principles, how we really move forward with happy, healthy, loving, cherishing relationships. And it is possible. I mean, I'm living proof of it, and I know it. It really is. So, and I just wanted to mention that the early bird special for that does end tomorrow. It starts on April 3rd. Early bird special is $195, and the regular price is $245. So if anybody is interested, I would love to see you there. I think it's a beautiful program, and I love the people that have participated, and we have a growing community, so it's wonderful. So thank you so much. Anybody have anything they want to just share at the end here? Nope, all good. Okay, Sharon, go and get a nap. I will see you later. Lovely to meet you, Kimberly. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Sharon.